Hello, nature enthusiasts. I'm here at one of my very favorite places in the whole world. It's this amazing spot called Bolinas Lagoon. It's an amazing stopover spot. It's a really important bird habitat, and it's got some great geology, great biology, great just everything. Let me tell you all about it. So, Bolinas Lagoon is right on the coast of California, right on the Pacific coast, north of San Francisco on the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's south of Point Reyes. And it is interesting geologically because it sits right on the San Andreas Fault. So if you can see those hills over to that side of me back there, those are actually, relative to my position, moving south, carrying the North American continent down towards the equator. Whereas the side that I'm standing on here is actually, relative to that side, traveling north, carrying the very sliver edge of coastal California, including Point Reyes, north towards Alaska. And this splitting, this rifting, is sort of tearing apart the landscape, and it forms a notch, a long notch. At the top, it's actually filled with water that is Tomales Bay. And at the bottom, the southern end, it is filled with water that is Bolinas Lagoon. Bolinas Lagoon is one of very few intact remaining estuaries on the western coast of North America. An estuary is where fresh water from the land meets salt water from the ocean and mixes. This is usually around the mouths of rivers. And here at Bolinas Lagoon, it's interesting because they're actually a set of creeks that come down from the mountains, pool in this low area right behind me, but they don't just rush straight out to the ocean because there's actually a sandbar that closes off most of the opening to the Pacific Ocean. So it creates this really shallow, broad, flat, tidal area for habitat to develop. And habitat has certainly developed. There's a huge range of different types of habitats here. So there's open tidal marshlands. There's mudflats. There's transition zones where the marsh goes up a little bit to a little bit more terrestrial area. There's riparian forest. There's including these tall sort of gallery forests where you have these big cottonwoods and alders. There are several creeks, like I said, that run into Bolinas Lagoon. So you've got waterways, freshwater waterways. You have on the far side the land sloping up fairly dramatically into conifer forests and sort of much more hilly terrain. There are even a few islands scattered around in the midst of Bolinas Lagoon. Some of them big enough and sort of developed enough to have trees growing on them. Some of them much more low-lying mudflat kind of islands where there's really no serious structural vegetation growing there. All of these different types of habitats allow for a huge diversity of different species to come and find a place to live. And sure enough, birding at Bolinas Lagoon, I tell you, world premiere birding. There are amazing numbers of species that come here. There's a rotating cast of characters depending on the season. In the wintertime, you have huge numbers of waterfowl hanging out on the lagoon. In fall, there's all sorts of migratory warblers and other songbirds, as well as a tremendous shorebird migration. And in spring as well, summer, there are lots of species breeding. Actually, just walking in here, I passed this wonderful little family of common yellowthroats, including some little fledglings that have not been out of the nest very long, barely have tails, really look funny looking little birds when they're young. So just stuff happening here all year long. And it's an amazing spot. The access point that I used this morning is one of my favorite spots, and it's in Pine Gulch. It's along the Bob Stewart Trail, named after the former Marin County Open Space Ranger, Bob Stewart, who was amazing. And it winds through a lot of that riparian forest, amazing stuff to see. And then it takes you out onto the coastal sort of salt marsh plains that you see right here, sort of alongside and behind me. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful habitat to bird through. Just crazy diversity, all sorts of amazing stuff. You just never know what you're going to see. There are also a bunch of points, especially on the far side of Bolinas Lagoon, where you can park your car, get out, and just have an amazing vista across all the water. So it has really great visibility. You can bring out binoculars or your spotting scope and scan along this huge area of habitat. Like I said earlier, this is one of the few remaining intact estuaries in the West Coast. Estuaries have been destroyed by development, habitat restoration, water rediversion, all sorts of different things impact estuaries and have made it so there are really fewer and fewer and fewer of them, especially big ones, remaining. This is actually one of, I think, only about 7 estuaries recognized as internationally important along the western coast of North America. So there used to be hundreds of estuaries along the western coast of North America, and now it's reduced to about 7 of sort of international importance. And it's internationally important because of the role that it plays in migration. Migrating birds need places to stop. They're traveling sometimes tremendously long distances from North America to South America. And they can't do it all in one go. They need to stop places and rest and feed, sort of refuel and get energy before making the next leg of their journey. And so you need these stopover sites at sort of regular intervals along their migratory route to make a migratory bird able to perform its migration every year, going one way one part of the year and then coming back in a different part of the year. But if you remove too many of those links, the entire system falls apart. And that's one of the reasons that Bolinas Lagoon is so important. It's one of those links. It's a hugely important migratory stopover site for birds traveling sometimes as far north as the high Arctic and going all the way sometimes as far as southern South America, depending on the species, and everywhere in between. So it's a tremendously important spot. It's a tremendously biodiverse spot. It's a really fantastic place to come and visit. And I hope that you do, if you're ever in Central California and you can take a day trip, out of the city, head north and come here to Bolinas Lagoon for some fantastic birding. I hope you enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this video. And thank you very much for the view. Subscribe to the channel. And until next time, gosh, get out here, enjoy the natural world. You can see how lush and dense the habitat is in some places. Makes some amazing, amazing habitat for all sorts of birds to live in. Oh, there's a hairy woodpecker up there. There it is. Hairy woodpecker. Little song sparrow. Oh. A second hairy woodpecker.